Well, hey, Bakersfield, world, everybody, who else is out there, whoever's watching, whatever's going on, welcome to A Valid Answer with
Marshall
and Scott. Where you can find us on kerncast.com every Sunday night at 5. You can find us on, search Kerncast on Facebook. You can find us on A Valid Answer at Facebook. You can email us at avalidanswer@gmail.com. Let us know what you want us to talk about, what you want us to say, comments about what we've said. Follow us. You can find us, A Valid Answer, on iTunes. Subscribe to us. You can even find us on YouTube. That's right. Subscribe. Get those subscriptions up so we get paid. No, sorry. That's not what it's about.
Just because we want to get the message out there.
That too. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, subscribe to us so we can get the message. No, seriously. Do you think we'd be doing this only if we got paid? Because no, we've been going for over half a year now.
Well, yeah.
Well,
this is episode 27.
This is episode 27. We've been going since February of this year on our podcast. But before then, we've been meeting for
probably 5 or 6 years at
least. Yeah,
if not
five or 6 years that we've been talking and getting together and talking and having these discussions and meeting face to face, because that's what it's about. It's about learning how to have those discussions with the people around you, treat them like human beings, love them, be friends with them. Even if you disagree, there's a place we can find where we can come together and have these discussions. That's what A Valid Answer is all about.
Exactly.
All right. So now that we got that schmuck out of the way, no, sorry.
And we have 5 more years worth of material to argue over.
Oh my gosh, no, there's so much. It's going to be never ending. Like it's never ending. So no, because the topic that we're talking about today, we've actually discussed before, but not in this way.
This is probably our 3rd show, I think, dedicated to the topic.
Probably so. Yeah, this would be
4th.
Third at least for sure, where we've talked about firearms, guns in general. What made this one different? If you didn't catch it last week, episode 26, we recorded because Marshall was out of town. So we pre-recorded. We knew that was going to be happening. We pre-recorded. We went to a shooting range about a month ago. And I took Marshall shooting for the first time. You had fired maybe a handgun and done some reenactment with some Civil War stuff before.
Way back.
But this was the first time he was shooting an assault weapon.
Oh my gosh!
And a few handguns, and he fired a very historic
a 1911
Colt 1911 that was actually built in 1912. So he was shooting a 106-year-old gun, and it still fired, and hopefully it was safe.
It seemed to work fine. I made it out unscathed.
So last week our show ended with a little bit of a teaser, but it ended with Marshall saying that he actually had fun.
I did have fun.
So we actually recorded our discussion on the way home, but we thought, hey, we're back. We couldn't put it all together in one show. We're back. We might as well talk about it live, and you guys can join in right now on Facebook and send in your comments and stuff. But Marshall, I know it was a couple weeks ago, but thinking back on the event, thinking back on the traumatic event of holding an evil assault weapon and shooting it, tell me your thoughts about what we did and your adventure in firearms.
It was hot and dusty and loud. Holy cow.
Yeah.
But it was also a lot of fun. I had a good time, and I can see why people enjoy shooting. You know, certainly there's challenge involved. The one thing that I enjoyed more than anything was shooting that sniper rifle.
Yeah.
And hearing the satisfaction, that little ping as the bullet hit that metal plate.
That delay, right?
Downrange, yes.
You get that little delay. It's like that. Pow.
Oh, did I miss? Oh, I hit it. All right.
Because you got the time it takes for the bullet to actually travel.
Yeah.
Then it hits, and then you got to wait the time for the sound of the hit to plink back to your ears.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, you could hear it even with ear protection on.
Yes, you sure could. So I had a good time. I enjoyed it. And it was very reassuring to see a number of people out there with these big, bad, dangerous weapons, and they were all handling them very responsibly. There was nobody out there who was, doing boom, boom, doing silly, weird, bizarre antics.
I'm in a John Woo movie.
Yeah, so it wasn't The Matrix Reloaded or whatever, and
it wasn't maybe as crazy as some leftists would like to think that gun crazy people are crazy.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, people didn't seem too crazy out there. That I'm sure that I was automatically registered as a Republican when I signed my name out there, and I probably voted for Trump the next 3 elections. I'll have to fix that on my registration form. I don't know. There's a lot of red meat, I'm sure, on the grill, but
we did our best to not have anybody else in the camera shots because we want to respect people's privacy. So what you didn't see was behind us and on the camera on the shooting range, a family had just shown up with some small kids, and they were shooting some 22s. What did you think about that? I'm curious.
I think if you're going to have guns in the home, firearm safety and training needs to start very young.
Okay.
And you need to teach people to respect the firearm. And that includes that when it's under lock and key, you don't touch it ever, and things like that. And I think you'll notice that I hope I showed plenty of respect for the tools out there. And I didn't do a darn thing until you told me. I waited for you to explicitly say, now pick up the pistol, pick up the rifle. You
guys go back and watch it. Watch last week's. It's really cool. If you ever, it was a really good thought experiment on training and handling of if you never handled it before, and it was. I thought it was just a great example of that. Now in the background, you will hear some people. In fact, there was one person who ended up in the background of our. I don't know who it was, but they said they were fine there in our background. That was while we were talking. You hear pop, 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 pop. They were firing some rapid fire. So, but it wasn't crazy. You practice for that, and so on the way back, we had a little bit of a discussion.
We did.
Did this experience alter in any way your view of firearm ownership?
We got to get rid of them all. I'm kidding. I felt that I still have the question, how do we keep society safe from all of the deaths and accidents and the homicides? Suicide certainly being a big deal. Suicides are, I think, well over a half of gun deaths. For me, that's a big thing to me, I do know, and I had this discussion with you, we talked about concealed carry.
Yeah.
And from my own independent research online, it appears that higher rates of concealed carry correlate with lower rates of crime. Obviously, if you don't know who is armed out there in the public or in the crowd, you're going to be a little bit less likely.
An armed society
is a polite society, as they say.
Then there seems to maybe be some evidence to that.
Right. That's what I'm saying, is there is some evidence behind that claim. This is not a new discussion. I mean, even if you go back to the medieval period, who was allowed to carry and wear a sword?
Yep, exactly.
Was a contentious topic.
Karate means empty hand, based on the peasants were not allowed to have weapons, so they learned how to fight without weapons. And that's, Japan, Okinawa.
I didn't know that.
When you see and
I've seen Karate Kid, but it's been a long time.
Right, the bow staff. The bow staff is a stick. They learned how to fight with a stick. Right, the same thing with the kamas. The kamas is a reaping tool. It's got the to reap. You learned how to fight with those. The sai is a planting tool.
Yeah,
it's a handle and it basically looks like a fork, but two of them are shorter because that was how deep it would go. You'd push it in to make the hole for the seed, and the two sides would stop you. You pull it out, put the seed. That's what a sai was. Found out you can fight against samurai swords with a sai. Nunchucks, they use those for beating rice, for beating the rice out of just two sticks with a rope in between. All of those karate weapons that we see were tools that the peasants had, and they taught themselves to use because they were restricted from having swords. Only the samurai could have swords. So they had to learn how to defend themselves. Again, the innocent civilians had to find tools to defend themselves against the armed people who were allowed to be armed.
So if we get rid of the guns, you're going to find a different creative way to defend yourself, right?
Everybody will, but that's great. Let's disarm the citizenry and make them targets to the armed people.
Boy, is that a loaded language or what? Right? I tell you.
Because if you make laws against guns, then only people who won't have guns are the innocent people who are law-abiding.
Well, I don't know, because there's a lot of lawbreakers overseas, but the rates of gun violence are much lower.
But the rates of violence in general are not. They'll find other tools.
Okay, but fatal attacks are certainly much lower, even overseas. Even if they go on a rampage with a knife,
Which they are.
Which they sometimes do.
No, it's actually
But the
climbing in England.
Right, because they don't have guns. But frankly,
So now they're trying to take away knives.
well, and eventually you get to what we call reducto ad absurdum, right? Reduced to absurdity.
Yeah.
You know, where you can't even have a plastic knife or fork or something like that. And then
Kids get suspended for eating their Pop-Tarts into the shape of a gun.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
Okay, so the thing is this. Okay, so
sorry. I don't know. Maybe we interrupted. Did it change your opinion? Let's start with there. Did this experience have any effect on what your opinion was before?
It improved my confidence that it is possible for a person to be a law-abiding firearm owner.
Okay.
And that if they handle the firearms in a trustworthy fashion, basically, it increased my sense of safety with the idea of lots of people having guns.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because if you are the typical firearm owner, and if the people on the range are typical of firearm owners,
yeah,
and I mean, by generalization, which it's a small sample size, but if I were to generalize, if everybody in the nation handled their firearms the way that the people did out there on that range, then I think we would have a fairly safe society, and I would have very little issue with the number of firearms that are out there in the wild in our society.
So on that, if there's an estimated 100 million gun owners with an estimated 350 million guns out there, and 30,000, which is 0.00001%, are what's actually used in a homicide. Wouldn't you say that the safe use of 99.9999% of the firearms shows that in fact the majority by far of gun owners are what you experienced?
Well, I don't know about your stats, and the problem is I don't believe rationally that the majority of firearm owners are what we saw out there that day. I think you are in a minority of gun owners.
Okay, so what evidence do you think of? Because the stats are true. There's 350 million guns in America.
Okay. I'm not in a position to argue with that. I'm sure.
That's a stat that's out there. It's an estimated stat because there is no, but it's based on sales, based on how many years, based on then the estimate. It's estimated as right around 100 million gun owners. 100 million gun owners in the United States. So
now, is that registered firearm owners or all firearm owners?
As far as I understand, it's registered firearm owners.
Because it seems to me virtually every household probably has at least one firearm.
For the most part, if you average it out, there's 300 million people and there's 100 million firearm owners. So on average, it's probably going to be 1 in 3.
Yeah. I don't know. It's expensive to go to a gun range. It's expensive. It's quite a thing to take
I didn't even tell you how
maintain.
much each of those bullets cost that we were shooting.
I know, right? So I'm sure
It's about a quarter a shot.
That's what I figured.
Yep.
Is it's in the double digits in the cents per squeeze of the trigger.
Yep.
It takes a lot of time, So
because they don't want us in the town. We had to drive 45 minutes out of town to get where we wanted to shoot. But anyway,
well, I'm not saying
that was facetious. I'm sorry.
But my point is, I don't know how many people in the population of gun owners are members of shooting clubs or associations. How many people routinely practice with their firearms? How many people maintain those firearms? How many people teach and educate their family members on those firearms? But I would imagine it's probably less than half. Now, that's just a guess, and I have no data for that.
All right.
And that means I'm concerned about the other half. I'm not concerned about your half, Scott. Going out there to the shooting range allayed my concerns with your half of the gun-owning population.
What you claim to be half.
Right.
With no evidence.
That's correct. This is completely out of my ear, and I could be
or
completely
some other
wrong.
Orifice.
But I have a feeling if there's 100 million people who own firearms, and out there at the gun range we saw maybe 1 to 2 dozen people, that's a lot of people who are not out there on a Saturday morning when that place should be jam-packed, right?
Yeah.
So granted, it's a non-scientific estimate.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think you can just kind of go, figure it. And I get the impression there's a lot of people out there who own firearms who aren't doing the things that I would expect responsible firearm owners to do.
Here's the thing: I grew up in a household. Again, this is all
anecdotal,
anecdotal,
and that's
but
fine.
I grew up in a household where we didn't really go shooting. It was maybe once or twice a year we would actually go shooting. But
And
we owned
that's
dozens
enough, though.
and dozens of guns, all growing up, and were properly trained, properly, we're safe with them and everything like that. But we didn't really go out and go shooting all that much.
But
so,
you had a modicum of training, and if you went
Yeah.
twice a year, that's
but just people
probably-
not showing up doesn't mean they're not training.
Okay, and that's fine too.
Yeah,
That's fine too.
That was the point I was trying to make.
I don't have any kind of way to judge how many people are not maintaining, training, and educating in their household.
That's true. That would be. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know it. I don't know if there's a correlation between that and firearm accidents. If a lot of the accidents and if a lot of the crimes and things that are happening with firearms are happening in those households where the training and the maintenance and the education are not taking place. And that's why, if anything, I don't know about the NRA. I think the NRA is pretty broken as an organization, in my personal opinion and observations. They're way too overly politicized. And that's kind of funny because they're supposed to be politically connected because they're trying to defend a Second Amendment right. That's a political act.
I mean, what I'm saying is
But-
the purpose of the NRA
Yes.
is to lobby for the people who, their purpose is to lobby for gun owners.
Right, but not necessarily. I don't know so much about the manufacturers over the well-being of the owners. And my question is, how much are they lobbying for the manufacturing industry versus the well-being of the owners? And I'm not too sure, but right now...
But what's the difference in the outcome?
Well, the difference is if you're focused on the owners, you're going to try to get everybody to maintain, educate, and train properly with the firearms, the end users, rather than being a lobbying mouthpiece for the manufacturers.
Surprise, I'm not even an NRA member.
I know, and you don't have to be.
Right? I mean, and I probably should if I believe that they are, standing up for what I believe. I should be. I just have never done that.
So why aren't you?
Money.
Okay. All right.
I don't want to pay the fees.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, honestly, it's like, if I'm going to be completely honest, I like being able to say that I'm not a registered Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like in the arguments being able to say I'm not a member of the NRA, because those two have been so demonized by public opinion,
right?
That I don't necessarily feel
by doing bad things.
I don't no. People are blaming the NRA for murder. That's ridiculous.
If the NRA roadblocks common sense legislation, if they don't support training, maintenance, and education,
they support training, maintenance, and education, but they're also going to stand up for the rights of what the majority, whether it's right or wrong, I'm on the fence on this, but what the majority of firearms owners believe, which is we don't want registration. We don't want the government knowing that we have guns or which guns we have.
I don't care what the majority believes in this case. I care.
So he doesn't believe in democracy. Anyway,
I care about what's what's rational, and that is the thing is when the NRA lobbies against the use of CDC statistics and information, prevents the CDC from researching gun violence and things like that. I want the best, most up-to-date, current data on guns, violence, and gun safety. All of these things we have to have the evidence so we can make a rational decision as a society. Because here's the deal. We're not getting rid of the guns. They're not going away. With hundreds of millions of firearms in the United States, they are here to stay, and it will take a century or more, probably more.
Yep.
I just fired a 112-year-old firearm, so the bottom line is they're probably here for the next century or two.
Yeah.
And if that's
they will still be around somewhere.
If that's the case,
nobody watched Waterworld. It's 500 years in the future, and they still had MP5s. Anyway,
if that's the case,
but yes, Josh, I think they were reloading. Josh was asking me, "Is that ammo cost because I reload?" No, it might even be more. I don't actually have stuff to reload. My dad used to, but I didn't inherit that, and actually, it got sold. No, it got given away to somebody else, and I didn't have that. So I don't reload. I have to buy my ammunition retail, so it costs me even more. So I think I estimate it's about a quarter each. Josh also said that the NRA used to be about training, and safe handling. Oh, come on, I can't see more. It won't let me see more. Exercise for community.
The bottom line is, if these firearms are here to stay, then we need all of the data and information that we can, so we can craft wise policies and wise legislation so that we can coexist in an armed society.
Yep. And here's the thing. This is where it becomes tough, because I do like that idea. I like the idea.
Of course, it's data, it's science.
Right. But what I don't like is that data can be cherry picked.
Well, that's why we need independent, the whole point of the scientific method is to
when it comes to
avoid that.
Right, but when the scientific method is applied to political issues, I don't trust it.
Well, no,
I don't
it's
trust
not
it
the
at
science.
all.
It's the politics that's corrupting, not the science.
No, the politics
science
is corrupting the science.
No.
Yes.
No.
You get somebody in there who's already biased. They ask certain questions a certain way.
The entire point of the scientific method is to eliminate bias in research.
Right, but when the majority of the people are biased towards that, when they check each other, they're not checking the same things. I don't trust it when it comes to political matters. Because
then how do we know anything? How do we know anything if we don't trust the scientific community to self-correct? Then how do we know anything in this world?
I don't trust the authority given to it with its failures, with its potential.
Then what better method do we have? Rune stones? Star charts? What are we going to do? My warm and fuzzy feeling, my gut tells me today it's going to be a bad day for guns. No guns today, maybe tomorrow.
No, it's very simple. The right to defend yourself is a right that you have. Any authority that we give to a governing body, any possibility of authority we give to a governing body to remove that right is a threat to that right.
I'm not sure I follow exactly what you're saying, but the first thing you said, that we have the right to defend ourselves, I agree with that.
Yes.
Of course, we have an inherent right to defend our lives and our property and our well-being. However, we don't have the right. My rights end where your rights begin. So your right to have safety is constrained by my right.
But my guns have never threatened you.
No, the mere existence of the thing isn't necessarily threatening. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is...
So you're saying it's who owns it?
What I'm saying is how it's
employed.
employed.
You just said the mere existence is not the threat. So it comes down to who owns it.
It's how it's employed.
It's how it's employed.
Right. Okay, so we have
I love that, because it goes back to Cap Polly. There are no evil guns, just evil people.
Right. The firearm is a tool.
Yes.
Okay, and so here I am, the most liberal guy in the world, and I'm agreeing with you that we have the right to defend ourselves, and that it's just a tool.
So
right?
So there are people who don't want me to have that right. There are people who are politically positioned in high political authority who don't want me to have that right. And I get really nervous if there's any type of scientific authority that they can take to take away that right.
Well, rights come with constraints and limitations. And so my question to you is, what constraints and limitations do you feel we should reasonably impose on people to ensure safety? Because you cannot allow people to say, well, I have the right to do whatever I want. I mean, for example, even on speech, right? You can't use speech that creates a dangerous situation.
Right. I don't have the right to shoot you.
Okay, so your rights end where my rights begin.
Yes.
So how do we enforce that right? How do we protect my life from a person with firearms?
You don't.
Okay.
That's not what it's about. I don't have the right to do it. Therefore, if I do it, you punish me. Mm-hmm. But preventative, removing my rights to prevent the possibility is what I have a problem with. Removing the rights of someone who's never done anything wrong to prevent the possibility of them doing something wrong is what I have a problem with. Restricting my rights because of what I could possibly do with my rights, I have a problem with.
Should I be allowed to own a bazooka?
Why not?
Okay. How about an atomic bomb? I mean, where do you draw the line? Don't shrug. The answer is no. Come on, Scott. No, you don't get to own an atomic bomb.
You can't make one. You know what it takes to do that?
But what if I could, right? What if it were theoretically possible? And what if it were? The bottom line is we have to draw lines. We have to impose rational limitations upon ourselves in order to protect what's reasonable. So what's reasonable? Is it reasonable to own a hunting rifle or a shotgun? I think so, especially if you live in a rural area. Those are everyday implements as important to you as a shovel or a pitchfork.
Mm-hmm.
And your truck and your dog, you need to have those things if you live in a rural area. On the other hand, do you need, let's say an MG42 machine gun, and when you live in an urban area, do we draw the line there? Where do we draw the line? That's going to be close to that line, I would think.
Well, so it's going to depend. So if you live in this area, then you have certain rights, but if you don't live in that area, you have different rights.
Well, no. If you live in a rural area, a machine gun probably isn't necessarily. I mean, how do you rationalize the ownership of a machine gun?
Why do you have to?
Well, because, again, there has to be some kind of boundaries. If you just say it's a free-for-all, then we end up in a situation where someone is going to abuse that free-for-all, and the consequences are going to be devastating.
So this is an interesting point. Cap Polly, not quite sure who that is, but thank you for joining on the conversation. I love it. Rational limitations come from having morals.
I like that. And morals come from society.
So society gets to determine what the rationalization
Well,
is.
that's literally what happens anyway.
Yeah.
That literally is how it works. Regardless of my opinion, regardless of your opinion, that is literally how it works. I'd like Cap to follow up there and explain with it where we get into a moral discussion here, I think. But I agree that you have to have some kind of morality in order to determine where you're going to draw the rational limitation. Okay. So basically at this point, I'm not saying we need to ban all firearms. I'm just saying we need to have rational limitations. Cap, that's a home run right there. That's exactly it.
Well, you're about to say it went foul instead of a home run.
No,
because he says no morals come from God.
Well, okay, no, that's that, and that's an excellent discussion that we need to have.
Which we did on episode like 7 or 8 or something like that. 6. Oh, Josh looked. He knows. Josh, our producer Josh over here, he just pointed out that's on episode 6 where we talk about morals.
There you go.
So we can make reference to.
I want to go back and watch episode 6 myself.
Yeah, and we'll watch that and be like, okay, we're gonna totally change our arguments and advance that. But
but I really like that insight. That's an amazing insight. That's
very
great.
nice, very nice.
And even though we disagree on the basis of morals, it's still true that those morals then determine where we draw that limit. So the question that I put to you again is, where do we draw that limit?
Where do we draw that limit?
And don't forget my question I asked in the pre-show: how many lives are okay for the right to own?
Yes, Josh Gunderson, I have raised a good producer. Good job, Josh. And he's got a great name, right, Josh?
His name is Josh.
Literally. Yeah, that's right, Josh and Josh. Sorry, repeat your question. My bad. Thank you for liking that.
Okay, so where do you think we should draw the reasonable limit? For what kind of firearms can you own? Where does morality say we should draw the limit? Because rationally, you're not going to say, even though you wanted to say, yes, you can have an atomic bomb. So somewhere between that little PPK pistol that shoots the little tiny bullets and an atomic bomb, there has to be a boundary we draw and say, you can have this, but not this. Mm-hmm. Where would you like to set that limit? You as the gun owner, I'm going to invite you to set your own limit.
You want me to arbitrarily establish where the line is going to be?
Not arbitrarily. I'd like to have a valid answer from you. I'd like to have a rational basis based on your morality. And you can use your morals from God, if you please. I just want to hear your valid answer to that. Where do you draw that line?
I'm not having a chance to really think it through.
And you might need time.
Yeah, I
might say, I don't know. That's a valid answer.
Right, but I don't want to shrug it off in that way either. I want to be able to say, yes, if you can make your own nuclear bomb, then you can. I want to be able to say that, but I know that it's not. I know that it's not reasonable. But as soon as I put some sort of arbitrary mark, then it's just an arbitrary mark.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I don't want to do. I don't want to just put, because when I say you want me to make an arbitrary mark, no, yes, it will be an arbitrary mark. I believe that we should have, it is our right to defend ourselves, not only against perpetrators who would want to do us crime, but have the ability to defend ourselves against a corrupt nation. Mm-hmm. So to be able to mass together, form a militia of already armed people who have the munitions to stand up against their government. That would be a reasonable non-arbitrary mark. Be sufficiently armed, and this was the intent of the founders with this amendment, was to be sufficiently armed to band together to have the power to fight the government. Mm-hmm. So what the government is allowed to have.
But you better stand up and salute the flag of that government. And I'm stockpiling arms against.
What the government is allowed to have, the people should be allowed to have.
Wow, really?
Yes.
M1 Abrams tanks?
If you can afford it.
Stealth drones, stealth bombers?
If you can afford it. Why should the government have that and you can't, to defend yourself against it? Tell me why the government should have the right to have that.
Because the government is supposed to be the apparatus of the people. Mm-hmm. And the government is supposed to... See, the problem is we keep framing the government as some other entity that's out there, like it's some king or dictator, mm-hmm. when the government is supposed to come from the people. It's government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And if the government then is truly an extension of the people, you can trust the government to have tools and the implements of war that's needed to defend us in the international community. There's no need for you and I to defend each other. You know, I don't need a nuke because you're not going to have a nuke. Mm-hmm. You know, you're my neighbor. You know, the government might need to have a nuke because the Soviet Union has nukes. You know, so there's a complete difference. But again,
at the same time, honestly, the government's not going to nuke its own cities. Because it needs its own industrial base. Yeah, it needs its own industrial base. Yeah. So I suppose we could say anti-personal or vehicular would be a limitation.
Okay, so no tanks.
No, I'm saying up to
tanks. You
know, because that is something that there's only so much structural. I don't want to say structural. There's only so much. What's the underlying, not structure, infrastructure. Mm-hmm. There's only so much infrastructural damage that can be done mm-hmm. with a personal or vehicle-borne weapon.
You sound like a person who's never had his car run over by an errant tank. You sound like a person who's never had his car run over by a tank. You know, that has happened before.
Yeah.
It's happened 2 or 3 times that I know of where somebody takes off in a tank and what do you do?
So that's for me. If you're asking for a line, that for me is, if I should be able to band together with other citizens and have the firepower needed to defend ourselves against our government.
Okay.
To sufficiently defend ourselves against our government, which, as we have found out over the last 40 years, is not actually that difficult.
What do you mean?
Viet Cong, mm-hmm. Iraq, mm-hmm. Afghanistan,
asymmetrical warfare.
Yeah.
Well,
without, but they did have
the Bundy Ranch
all of them.
Standoff.
But all of them did have automatic weapons and bazookas.
Well, they had multinational
and vehicles.
Support,
right?
too.
But but there's a certain level that you still need to have. But you can sufficiently defend yourself against a nuclear power if you have enough of these arms. Mm-hmm. You keep coming back with, well, they got nukes. Yes, but we can defend ourselves against a nuclear power. Mm-hmm. It's been shown before. Mm-hmm. So having that sufficient of firepower to be able to defend yourself against your nation is what I feel the limit should be.
So the problem is, and the real problem in the status quo, because we're going to move from concept to reality, because right now we're speaking theoretically. Right. That theoretically the people should have the means to defend themselves against an oppressive government, which I get that. On the other hand, we don't necessarily have an oppressive government in the status quo. Now, we can certainly debate this, so we'd be splitting some hairs. But we do have a greater threat from our own armed neighbors who, for whatever reason, a lot of times it's because they're just nuts.
Yeah.
Going out and doing mayhem with firearms. We have school shootings, we have nightclub shootings, we have shootings in offices and workplaces, and they're almost a daily occurrence in the United States.
Because they know they can do it with impunity because people are not defending themselves. People
I don't know about that.
People are not. Yeah, because they go every place that happens is a gun-free zone.
So how do you know that's a cause, Mister? I don't trust science. How do you know that's the cause?
Well, I'm just going to show you the evidence and show you all of these places where it happened were gun-free zones.
Well, I didn't even know what you mean by that.
Every school shooting has been in a gun-free zone. Every
school
theater has
shootings-
been in
no.
a gun-free zone.
Well, I don't even know what you mean by a gun-free zone.
There's
because
signs
the
that say it's
schools
gun-free.
Okay, that doesn't do anything. That's irrelevant.
No,
There-
it keep,
there
no,
are
no, no,
armed
no. Hold on,
police
hold on. No,
officers at
it keeps
schools.
me from carrying a gun there.
Okay, but there are
It
armed
keeps
police
other
officers
parents.
in
It keeps
these gun-free
yeah,
zones.
one of them. It keeps
Well,
parents. It keeps teachers. It keeps parents. It keeps all of us from having a gun there.
Okay,
So it does do that, doesn't it?
so you want to arm?
Did
you
it-
want to
did
arm
it
the
keep-
teachers or the students or
Did
both?
it keep?
Who do you
did it
wanna
keep-
arm?
Did it keep the criminal from coming into a gun-free zone and shooting?
No, it didn't stop the criminals. So who
but
do
it
you-
did.
do you
But it
wanna arm
did
the-
stop.
Do you
the good
want to arm
people.
the teachers or the students too?
If they are trained to, the teachers should have the option to.
What about the students?
They're too young to have it. Now
Oh,
in college,
well,
no.
wait a minute. You didn't mention that as a restriction. So
They have
college.
to be 18.
Okay, so
They're an adult.
18 folks.
No,
18.
a legal adult, just like anything else, a legal adult. So
Okay.
yeah, in college, they should be able to have it.
Wow. Okay. So
Why should only the criminal be able to have it?
how many people are acceptable? How many deaths are acceptable for us to have a gun-friendly society?
How many deaths are acceptable to have cars?
Again, that's not the question.
Yes, it is.
That's a red herring. That's a
No,
fallacy.
your question is a red herring.
No,
Yes,
the question is
no,
a
your
question.
No, your question
The
is a red herring.
response is a red herring.
No, your question is a red
A
herring.
question can't be a red herring
Yes, it
unless
can.
it's a
You-
response.
No, you are asking a
it's
loaded.
not how the
Hold
logical
on.
fallacy works.
You're asking a loaded question.
Well,
The loaded
I think
question.
it's a legit question.
It's not a legit question. You are putting
absolutely
You are
legit.
no. You're putting it. Okay, so if that's the question, then my question is legit. How many cars are acceptable? How many hammers are acceptable? How many deaths by hammers are acceptable? How many deaths by baseballs are acceptable? How many deaths by baseball bats are acceptable? I can ask that same question for any inanimate object.
I'll answer all of those for you with one word.
And it's an irrational.
Zero.
And it's an
Zero.
irrational question.
Zero are acceptable.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Zero are acceptable. There you go.
So how many firearm deaths are acceptable to you
Never-
in exchange for
cool.
the right to own and
Zero
bear
are
arms?
acceptable.
Zero.
Fine.
Zero
So that
is
doesn't
your
do
answer.
anything. But that doesn't accomplish anything.
Okay.
That's why it's a loaded question with
So-
a nonsensical,
so
irrational
at what
answer.
point? Okay, here's the deal. Okay, when it comes
It's
to
about
cars,
the people. No, it's
when
not.
It comes
It's
to
never
cars,
about
you
the
wanna
tool.
talk about- do you want to talk about cars or guns?
No, I don't. I don't want to talk about either. That's my point. The point I am making is that by making it about the object is what's wrong. That's why I brought up cars. That's why I brought up baseball. Making it about the object is the red herring.
Okay.
Your question, making it about the object, is the problem. The problem is not the object. The problem is the people. You even said it. It's not the object. It's the person. That's the problem. So when you say how many deaths by this are acceptable, that question in and of itself is a loaded question that only gives an irrational answer. So it's an irrational question.
Okay.
So
do I
so
get
so
to
you-
speak now?
so your question is nullified.
Okay, fine. Here's what I want to point out. When cars cause deaths, we investigate, we set higher standards, we do everything we can to mitigate deaths by car. We change traffic laws. We put more police out. We put cameras on the highways and in the intersections. We do everything we can to mitigate fatalities by cars, which are not designed to kill, but are rather designed to bring utility into our lives.
Good for you. You get a cookie.
Thank you. I'm going to claim Smith's cookie. I'm going to collect on that. I just want you guys to know that sometimes our conversation can seem a little heated, but It comes from a place of understanding and compassion for one another. So we're not really mad at each other. The firearms are designed specifically to kill, to
Yes.
destroy.
Yes.
Okay, and we don't see the same
Knives are
level.
designed to cut
Yes,
flesh.
but we don't see the same apparent commitment to understanding and increasing public safety with firearms than we see with cars, which is a key difference here in the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets back full circle to me saying, where do you draw the line? Scott, guns are dangerous, especially in the hands of untrained people.
Mm-hmm.
You would agree with this. What
There
do
are
we
so
do?
many things that are dangerous in hands of untrained people.
I understand that.
So many things.
But firearms are specifically designed to kill and destroy.
So is poison.
Okay? But we take great care to restrict access to poison and its use and its deployment and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. We take much less care when it comes to firearms. So I
Really?
wanna
You've
know,
tried to purchase a firearm recently?
No, I have not, but I'm sure I can if I want to.
Go try it. See what it takes.
Well, I'm sure you fill out a form and you buy your firearm and you leave the store. Or maybe there's even a waiting period. On the other hand, if I want some high grade, poison for bugs or something, I'm probably going to have a certain license to do it.
No. You can buy poison that'll kill people at the grocery store.
Like what?
Any of those bug sprays.
Well, okay.
Drano. You can
Okay.
buy Drano at the drugstore and kill somebody with it.
I'm sure. Okay. I don't know what to say, Scott. I'm just saying
The reason you don't know what to say is because you keep making it about the object, which is irrational.
But
you won't be able to come up with a rational response ultimately when you make it about the object.
so
Because making it about the object is deflecting the problem.
okay. So how do we manage? I mean, because we make all these laws about the cars, we make all these laws about the chemicals, and so on. Where are the rules?
They
regarding the
exist. That's what I'm
guns?
saying. Go try to buy a gun
Why
and
don't
tell
they
me.
work?
Because you're trying to stop the problem by stopping the object and not fixing the people. Thank you for making my point. The
Okay.
gun laws don't work. You just made my point.
But
Because
we
if you make
don't
the law,
have the
if you
commitment
make
to
the law,
safety that
if
we
you
have
make
with
the law
automobiles and
about
other
the object,
things.
if you make the law about the object, you won't solve the problem.
Okay, so what's your answer? What's
Let's
your answer?
fix people.
And how do we fix people?
That's my job.
Okay.
Come to church.
Okay.
Come to church.
So how do you fix a person who's mentally ill? How do you fix a person who doesn't believe?
Come to church.
But come to church can't be the answer to every problem in our society.
It is.
But the problem is
It
we
is.
don't live in a homogenous society where everybody's Christian.
That doesn't change the answer.
I don't know because
I work where it's part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I get that, Scott, but what I'm telling you is you can even have theistically homogenous societies and you still have all of these problems. I mean, look at the Middle East. It's probably one of the most theistic places in the world. They behead one another there.
Mm-hmm. Because that's in their religion. Come to my church.
Well, I don't want to digress.
I know, but I'm
get
just-
to
but
the
I'm- but I-
criticisms of Christianity.
But I'm saying I'm working at the solution.
Mm-hmm. And
Because you
I'll-
will always be struggling when you don't make it about the people. This is the basis of every subject you and I talk about.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Because you keep trying to put it on all these things that are outside the people when it's always the person. It's the person,
Right.
it's the choice, it's the human heart. That's the problem. And the solution is why I work at a church.
So why do we
Because
have
that
violence
is
in
the solution.
churches if churches are the solution?
Because people are coming into the church and doing violence. But I'm saying that it's still human beings. So
Yeah.
let's get that fixed. Let's come in, let's get together, let's get it fixed.
Yeah, I don't know, Scott. The problem is we live in reality, and I think that's a fantasy. The whole idea that everybody's going to get together, go to church, and sing Kumbaya, and all of the world's problems are going to be solved is irrational. Even in the New Testament, we see in the early Christian communities that they're not exactly singing Kumbaya. In fact, Paul talks about this in many different letters where he's saying, wait, you guys need to get along. You need to work out your disputes and so on. You know this.
Yes.
Okay?
Because we're humans That's why we need to fall back to our Creator. That's why it is imperfect. We will always be imperfect.
So why is it that in atheistic society, or places like Scandinavia, where they have less religious belief,
Because they are
don't
homogenous
have the
already.
problem? They're not necessarily homogenous.
Yes. Come on. All of those nations, look at the majority of them. They are mostly homogenous.
Check out the UK. The UK isn't particularly
You're not talking about the
homogenous
UK.
anymore.
You were saying the Scandinavian nations, and the Scandinavian nations that everybody
But
points to.
let's look at
they're
the rates of
mostly
gun violence in
homogenous.
the UK.
You can't. No, look at the rate of general violence. It's still happening. You took away the tools, but violence is still happening.
But it's
People
not
are-
always fatal violence.
Oh, so okay, so it's the degree. It's okay that people still are violent. And we don't change
fatal
them.
violence is pretty darn permanent. I'm not saying that one kind of violence is more okay than the other, but if you got to pick, I certainly don't want fatal violence.
I want to pick again. You fall back on the let's do something, and I always fall back on let's do the right thing. You're basically that's fine. The lesser of two evils, and you're fine with that.
But what if your right thing is completely fantastical? That's
It's
the
still
that's
the
my
right
response.
thing. That's what integrity is about.
Okay,
It's
it
doing
can be the right
thing.
thing to you, Scott, but the problem is it's entirely impractical. It's physically impossible to pull off, given the complexity of the world in which we live. So what's the rational solution? Where can we meet in the middle? A little bit of you, a little bit of me, and do something that is more effective than doing nothing. That's a tough one.
Yeah. That again, yeah, that's what it is, because I believe you can see that the evidence is there that church makes people better. You can see people's lives being changed for the better when they come to church. And if we can get more people to do that, I think you'll have less of these problems.
Well,
So, but everything in our society, everything in our media, everything in our entertainment, and everything in our society is pointing people away from church and God. And ever since that has happened, this is where we are.
so do we
people
have to
have
go
always-
full Amish?
We've had America has had guns, America has had weapons, America has had all this stuff, but it is the society turning away from God that has ruined the hearts of people, that has caused all of this violence to come out. We didn't used to have this happening when people were tuned to God.
So is the only solution theocracy?
Yep.
Wow.
Now, the government can't force you to do that. That's not my answer.
That's the only way you can get theocracy.
Well, okay, sorry, not theocracy. The answer is God. Sorry, not theocracy.
Right,
The answer
okay.
is God. But you can't force that by law. That is not how change of heart works.
So
The
given that
more
reality,
you try to do it by law, the less successful you'll be. The more you try to remove God from human beings will take us to the society where we're at right now, where people don't value other people's lives.
okay, so given this
It's
reality,
the value of other people's lives. The tool makes it easier. I agree with that. But it's the lack of value for other people's lives that is the problem.
are you suggesting that atheists don't value lives? Especially when you only get one? You don't get a second one after you die?
Maybe you value your life.
No, there are many atheists who value lives, but we're getting off into a whole nother topic.
Yeah, right. But I'm just saying we have lost as a society the value of human life. Can you say that the average that we value human lives more now than we did before as a society?
I can't even answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah, Jackie, if let's not do anything else about guns and hope everyone goes to church. That's why I work at a church. That's the answer.
Well,
Jesus Christ is the answer. If I didn't believe that,
I
why
think
would I work at a church?
Reasonable rules and restrictions and encouraging responsible firearm ownership
And how's that worked?
is a big part of the answer.
How's that worked?
Well, at what point we're not doing it, it certainly hasn't worked yet. So we have to do it.
Nice. Well, hey, this has been a valid answer talking about
I want
guns.
my cookie now.
You want your cookie now. That came from, I don't even know where that came from. I was in high school and had a friend in high school in my graphic arts class. That was always his thing. When somebody did something that was like, oh, you think you did really good? Well, give that man a cookie. Like that was like, and that stuck in my head all growing up. Give that man a cookie. it's kind of it was a sarcastic way of saying, well, good for you.
I want to thank everybody for
Yes,
commenting.
this has been a great comment. Some of them I didn't quite catch, but Josh, Cat Polly, Jackie, hey guys, thanks for jumping in there. Continue typing up on here, and we'll follow up with this. So yeah, thank you very much. This has been a Valid Answer every Sunday night, 5:00 on kerncast.com. A pastor and an atheist. We just make a fool out of ourselves right here on live radio and allow ourselves to just be, talked to and communicated with. And we want that. We want this discussion. We want this to happen. And we appreciate you guys joining in. Join in as much as you can. You can find us on iTunes, Valid Answer. Find us on Facebook, A Valid Answer, and Kerncast. And here every Sunday at 5:00. Until next time, see you guys.